My daughter called me at 2:47 inches the morning. I know the exact time, because I'd been awake anyway, sitting in my study with a cup of chamomile, going cold beside me, trying to remember why I'd walked in there. That happens sometimes now. I'll move from one room to another and stand in the doorway wondering what I came for. It bothered me more than I let on to anyone. When my phone lit up and I saw Claire's name, my first thought was accident, car crash, hospital. The kind of call every parent dreads from a child living 1,200 miles away. Dad. Her voice was low, almost a whisper, like she was hiding somewhere. Are you alone right now? It's 3 in the morning, sweetheart. Where else would I be? Is Marcus there? Or Renee? My son and his wife had been staying with me for 6 weeks at that point. They'd moved into the guest wing after Renee's company announced layoffs, and Marcus said they needed to get back on their feet. I'd said yes without hesitating. That's what you do for family. They're asleep, I said. Claire, what's going on? A pause. I heard her exhale slowly, the way she used to when she was a teenager about to tell me something she knew I didn't want to hear. Dad, I need you to listen to me very carefully, and I need you to not say anything out loud that you wouldn't want someone to hear through a wall. I set down my tea. I've been going through some numbers, she said. Your numbers. My daughter is a forensic accountant. She works for a firm in Seattle that investigates financial fraud, mostly corporate cases, companies cooking their books, executives hiding assets. She is very good at her job. She has a mind like a scalpel. She finds the bleed and traces it back to the wound. What numbers? I asked carefully. The power of attorney you signed in February. Dad, do you remember signing that? I did remember. Marcus had brought me a stack of papers one evening after dinner, explained it was a precaution, said every financial planner recommends it for men my age living alone. I was 68. I'd been alone since Eleanor died 4 years ago. It had seemed reasonable. Marcus is a reasonable person, or I thought he was. I signed without reading everything the way I should have. I remember, I said. Dad, that document doesn't just let Marcus help with your bills if you're incapacitated. It gives him full authority over your accounts, your investments, and your real estate. Right now, while you're perfectly healthy, without any medical determination of incapacity required. The room felt very still. He's already accessed 2 of your brokerage accounts, she said. Small withdrawals at first, test amounts, then larger ones. Over the past 3 months, he's moved $43,000 into an account I traced to Renee's name. I said nothing. I was thinking about the past 3 months. Marcus handling my mail. Marcus on the phone with my financial advisor. Marcus suggesting I didn't need to attend the quarterly review in person, that he could represent me, that it would save me the drive downtown. There's more, Claire said. I talked to a property attorney today. The deed to your house, Dad. Marcus filed a quitclaim deed in January. Before he even moved in. It's notarized with what looks like your signature, but I need you to think hard. Did you sign anything about the house? Anything at all? I thought about January. Eleanor's 4th anniversary had been in January. I'd been low that month, distracted, going through the motions. Marcus had visited for a long weekend. He'd been attentive, kind, helped me sort through some of Eleanor's things in storage. I'd signed some papers, he said, were related to updating the estate plan. I don't know, I said quietly. I may have. I wasn't paying close attention. Okay, she steadied her voice. Okay, Dad, here's what I need you to do. Tomorrow morning, act completely normal. Don't let on that we talked. Don't confront Marcus or Renee. Don't touch your phone while they can see you. I'm calling a real estate attorney and a fraud investigator first thing when their office is open, and I'm booking the first flight to Pittsburgh. Claire, Dad. There was something in her voice I hadn't heard since she was a little girl waking up scared in the dark. Please, just trust me. I told her I trusted her. I'd always trusted her. I set the phone down on my desk and sat in the quiet of my study, surrounded by the things I'd collected over 40 years of practicing medicine. The framed anatomy prints on the walls. The antique apothecary cabinet I'd found at an estate sale in Vermont 20 years ago, its small labeled drawers still filled with the original glass vials. An 1890s surgical kit in a velvet-lined mahogany case. All the instruments still intact, gleaming. I'd spent my career as a cardiothoracic surgeon. 41 years opening chests, repairing hearts, closing wounds. I understood better than most people that damage isn't always visible from the outside. A heart can look perfectly fine while it's quietly failing. A family can look fine too. I did not sleep that night. In the morning I made breakfast like I always did. Eggs and toast, coffee, the news on low in the background. When Marcus came downstairs in his robe, I handed him a cup without being asked, the way I always did, and asked how he'd slept. "Fine," he said. "Great, actually." I watched him pour sugar into his coffee and thought about the fact that my son had moved $43,000 out of my accounts and was apparently the legal owner of my house, and he was standing in my kitchen telling me he'd slept great. "You seem tired, Dad," he said. "Didn't sleep well," I said. Entirely true. Renee came down 20 minutes later in her exercise clothes, poured herself a green smoothie she'd started making in my blender, and asked if I had any plans for the day. "Errands," I said. "Nothing important." She nodded, already looking at her phone. I had not realized how much they'd settled in. Their shoes lined up by the door. Renee's skincare products taking up half the bathroom shelf. Marcus's laptop permanently occupying the corner of my dining room table. They'd rearranged the guest wing furniture without asking, moved a chair from the sitting room I was fairly certain was now in their bedroom. Small things, each one individually, too small to complain about. Together, they added up to something I hadn't noticed happening. My house had started to feel like theirs, and I had started to feel like a guest in it. Claire landed at Pittsburgh International at 11:40 that morning. She came straight from the airport, still pulling a carry-on, and when I opened the door she hugged me for a long time without saying anything. Marcus and Renee were both out. Renee at the gym, Marcus claiming a lunch meeting. Claire sat across from me at the kitchen table and laid out printed documents in careful rows, the way she lays out evidence. The power of attorney was worse than she'd described over the phone. A real estate attorney named Sandra Cho, who Claire had spoken to that morning, had reviewed it and found language that essentially allowed Marcus to act as my legal agent in any capacity, at any time, for any transaction, without restriction. The language about incapacity had been in an earlier draft, Sandra believed. It had been removed. The quitclaim deed to the house was real. My signature was on it. I looked at it for a long time, trying to remember signing it. I remembered a folder. I remembered Marcus saying something about updating the estate documents. I remembered thinking it was a lot of paperwork and trusting that my son would not hand me something harmful. "The signature is legal," Sandra said over speakerphone. "Whether it was obtained by fraud is a different matter. Did you understand what you were signing at the time?" "I thought I was signing estate planning documents," I said. "I had no idea this was a transfer of ownership." "That's fraudulent inducement," she said. "We can challenge it. But I want to be straightforward with you, it's not a fast process." Claire also showed me screenshots of bank transactions. $43,000 gone in increments that stayed just under the threshold that would trigger automatic alerts. Whoever had structured the withdrawals knew what they were doing. I looked at my daughter. She had Eleanor's eyes, that same quality of seeing through things to what they actually were. Eleanor had always seen through things. "How long have you known?" I asked. 3 weeks, she said. "I noticed something in January when you mentioned your investment portfolio had been reassigned to a new advisor. I asked you for the advisor's name and I couldn't find any professional registration for them anywhere. I started digging." She paused. "I wanted to be sure before I said anything. I didn't want to be wrong." She hadn't wanted to be wrong. She'd spent 3 weeks confirming what she suspected about her brother before she brought it to me, because she understood the weight of what she was carrying and didn't want to drop it carelessly. I thought about Marcus. He was 41 years old. I'd paid for his college, his first car, the down payment on the house he and Renee had sold 2 years ago when they said they wanted to downsize. I'd given him money without being asked when he was between jobs. I'd loaned them $15,000 3 years ago that was never repaid and that I'd never pushed on because I didn't want to make things uncomfortable. I'd been generous because I'd loved him and because his mother had loved him and because she wasn't here anymore, and I felt, in some small guilty way, like generosity was a form of apology for all the years I'd worked too much. And he had taken the house. "What do we do?" I said. Claire had already thought it through. We did not confront Marcus directly. We spent that afternoon and the next morning quietly and methodically gathering everything. I retrieved my original estate documents from my safe, contacted my bank's fraud department, met with Sandra Cho in person while Marcus believed I was having lunch with a colleague from my old practice. Claire had found a private investigator through her firm who specialized in financial elder abuse. His name was Terrence, and he was very calm and very thorough, and had clearly done this many times before. The good news, Terrence told me, sitting in Sandra's conference room, is that they haven't moved fast enough to cover everything. The transfers are documented. The deed filing is a matter of public record and was done sloppily. If this had gone another 4 to 6 months, it would have been significantly harder to untangle. My daughter caught it early, I said. He nodded at Claire. That's exactly right. On the 4th day, I revoked the power of attorney through my attorney's office. The bank accounts were frozen pending fraud investigation. The quitclaim deed was formally contested with a supporting affidavit describing the circumstances under which I'd signed it. That evening, when Marcus came home and found a locksmith changing the deadbolts, I'd arranged it for 5 p.m. Knowing exactly when he and Renee returned from wherever they went during the day, he stopped on the front porch and stared. "Dad?" He looked at the locksmith, then at me, standing in the open doorway. "What's going on?" I had thought about this moment for 4 days. I'd rehearsed what I might say, standing there in my own doorway, looking at my eldest child with his overnight bag and his confusion that was not quite genuine enough. I didn't use any of the words I'd rehearsed. "Your things are on the porch," I said. "You have 30 minutes. "What are you talking about?" "Dad, I know about the accounts, Marcus. I know about the deed. I know about the power of attorney." I kept my voice level. This was not different from surgery. "You do not let your hands shake. 30 minutes. The color drained from his face. Not the blush of someone falsely accused, the gray of someone whose calculations have just collapsed. Renee arrived 20 minutes later, parking on the street and walking up to find Marcus loading bags into her car. She looked at me once with an expression I recognized from years of dealing with hospital administrators who'd been caught not guilt, but rapid recalculation of next moves. She didn't speak to me. Marcus, with his bags half loaded, turned back one more time. "Dad, please, let me explain." "There isn't an explanation," I said. "There's just what you did. It was supposed to be temporary. We were going to—" "Marcus." I looked at my son, my firstborn, the boy I'd taught to drive in an empty parking lot, who'd cried when his dog died when he was 12, who'd called me from the hospital the night his mother passed and said simply, "Dad, she's gone," like he was reporting something he couldn't process, because he wasn't. "I know what you were going to do. Go." He went. The legal process that followed was not fast, and it was not clean, and there was nothing satisfying about any of it in the way people imagine justice feels before they experience it. The bank's fraud investigation substantiated the unauthorized transfers within 3 weeks. The Attorney General's Elder Financial Abuse Unit opened a case. Terrence, the investigator, had uncovered something broader. Marcus and Renee had done variations of this before. Her mother, 8 years earlier, a small estate in Ohio that had been absorbed quietly into their accounts during a period when the woman had been ill. The case had never been prosecuted because her mother died and no one looked too closely. My case gave them somewhere to look. Sandra filed the legal challenge to the quitclaim deed. The judge who reviewed the evidence was a woman named Patricia Holloway, who had been on the family court bench for 22 years, and she looked at the documents the way I imagined she'd seen documents like these before, with the particular weariness of someone who has watched this story play out too many times. The deed was invalidated. My house remained mine. Marcus was charged with financial elder abuse, fraud, and 2 counts of forgery. Renee was charged alongside him. Their public defenders tried various angles that Marcus had genuinely believed he was helping manage his father's estate, that the power of attorney had been properly explained, that I had been confused about what I'd signed rather than deceived. Sandra had anticipated each of these and had documentation to counter all of them. I testified at the preliminary hearing. I sat across a courtroom from my son and answered questions about the night in February I'd signed the power of attorney, about my mental state, about what I'd been told and what I'd understood. Marcus did not look at me during my testimony. He looked at his hands, or at the table, or at some middle distance that didn't contain me. I did not look away from him. I was a surgeon for 41 years. I learned to look directly at what was in front of me. The prosecution offered a plea agreement. Marcus accepted it. 2 years federal supervision, full restitution of the $43,000, and a permanent injunction against serving in any financial capacity for a family member or elderly person. He would not go to prison, something his attorney had apparently negotiated carefully, perhaps knowing that a jury hearing about Renee's mother in Ohio might not have been so forgiving. Renee accepted a separate agreement. Her terms were similar. I sat in Sandra's office the afternoon after the agreement was finalized and felt nothing I had expected to feel. Not triumph. Not relief. Exactly. Something quieter and harder to name. "You held up well," Sandra said. "I've delivered bad news to patients for 40 years, I said. "You learned to hold yourself steady." She nodded. "What will you do now?" I told her I'd been thinking about that. A month after the plea was finalized, Claire flew back to Pittsburgh. We had dinner at a restaurant Eleanor and I had loved, a small Italian place in Shadyside with red-checkered tablecloths that hadn't changed in 30 years. We ordered what we always ordered. "How are you actually doing?" Claire asked. Not the version I'd been telling neighbors and old colleagues, the fine, managing, keeping busy version. She wanted the actual one. I thought about it before answering. I'd been thinking about it for weeks. "I feel foolish," I said. "That's the part nobody tells you, that you'll feel foolish. I spent 40 years diagnosing what was wrong with people, and I didn't see what was happening in my own house." "He's your son," Claire said. "You trusted him because that's what you do with your children." I should have paid more attention to the paperwork. "Yes," she said, "because Claire doesn't soften things unnecessarily." "You should have. So should I. Sooner than I did." She turned her water glass in her hands. "I keep thinking about Mom. She always said Marcus had a way of getting people to look past the thing that bothered them. She called it a gift. She meant it as a warning. Eleanor had been the more perceptive parent. I had been the one who worked long hours and came home and loved my children without examining them particularly closely, because I'd been tired and because I trusted them and because I thought love and trust were the same thing. They're not the same thing. "He called me," I said. Claire looked up. "Last week." Left a voicemail. Said he was sorry. Said Renee had been the one pushing the plan initially, that he'd gotten pulled along. I paused. That he missed me. "What did you do with the voicemail?" "Saved it," I said. "Gave it to Sandra in case it's useful later." A small silence. I didn't call back. "Are you going to?" I thought about my son's voice on that message. He had sounded like himself, or like the version of himself I'd believed in. The voice of the boy who'd called me from the hospital the night Eleanor died. That boy was real, too. He wasn't a fiction. The same person who'd made that call was the person who'd transferred $43,000 out of my accounts and signed my house to himself while I grieved. "I don't know," I said honestly. "Maybe. Not now." Claire nodded like that was the right answer. After dinner, we walked through Shadyside the way Eleanor and I used to, past the old brownstones with their lit windows, through the small park at the end of the block where the trees were just starting to come in. April in Pittsburgh, still cold enough for a jacket. "I've been thinking about the house," I said. "Are you going to sell it?" "No." I surprised myself with how certain that was. "No, they don't get to take the house from me even indirectly. I'm going to stay, but I'm going to make some changes I'd already started. New locks, a security system, a conversation with my financial advisor, a new one, who had met with me directly rather than through Marcus, and who had spent 2 hours reviewing my accounts and making sure everything was exactly where it should be. And I want you on everything, Claire. My estate documents, my accounts, everything. As trustee and power of attorney. Dad, I'm 1,200 miles away." "Yes," I said. "And in 3 weeks you found what was happening in my own house before I did. Distance hasn't made you less useful to me. It's made you more objective." She laughed a little, and it was Eleanor's laugh, and for a moment the park felt very full. The apothecary cabinet in my study has 48 drawers. Each one is labeled in faded copperplate ink with the name of whatever it originally held: laudanum, calomel, spirits of camphor, things doctors used 150 years ago that we now know were useless or actively harmful. I've filled them with different things. Cufflinks in some, old coins in others. A drawer for buttons, Eleanor collected. A drawer of folded notes in my children's handwriting from when they were young. Mother's Day cards, birthday cards. Little papers that said things like, I love you, Daddy, with backward letters. I found Marcus's cards in there a few weeks after he left. A Valentine he'd made in first grade, construction paper, lopsided heart, misspelled but earnest. A Father's Day card from when he was maybe 9 that said, "You are the best dad in the world," and he'd drawn a picture of us both in white coats because that year he'd announced he wanted to be a doctor like me. He became an account manager for a mid-size insurance company instead. That's fine. Most of us don't become what we announce at 9. But I'd kept the card because he'd meant it. I believed he'd meant it. I put the cards back in their drawer and closed it. People ask me sometimes, older men I know from the hospital, from the neighborhood, what it's like now, what I've learned. They want a clean lesson, something portable they can carry away from my story and apply to their own. I tell them, read the paperwork, every line. No matter how much you trust the person handing it to you, read it anyway. Not because you're suspicious, because you owe it to yourself to know what you're agreeing to. I spent 40 years telling patients to ask questions, to understand exactly what procedure I was recommending and why, to be partners in their own care rather than passive recipients of whatever I decided. I should have applied that same standard to my own life. I tell them, your children love you, and they can also want things that are bad for you. Those two facts can coexist. One doesn't cancel the other. Love is not protection. It is not the same as trustworthiness. It is not the same as good judgment. People who love you can convince themselves that what's good for them is also good for you, can reshape the story until they believe it, can love you and take from you at the same time without experiencing much internal conflict about it. That is one of the harder things about being human. I tell them, find the person in your life who will call you at 2:47 inches the morning and speak carefully and ask you to trust them. And then do that. Trust them. Claire came back for a weekend in June. We went to a farmer's market Eleanor had liked, bought tomatoes and bread, and a bunch of lavender that Claire put in a glass on my kitchen windowsill. We watched a movie in the evening and didn't talk about Marcus or Renee or the case, and it was the best day I'd had in a long time. Before she left for the airport, she stood in my study for a while, looking at the apothecary cabinet. "Mom always loved this thing," she said. "I know. She's the one who found it. Estate sale in Vermont, 1998. She spotted it immediately in a barn full of furniture and said, 'Arthur, that's the most beautiful thing I've ever seen.' And she meant it absolutely." Claire smiled. She had good instincts. "The best," I said. "Better than mine." She hugged me at the door for a long time, the way she had when she'd arrived 4 months ago with her carry-on and her printed documents and whatever it had cost her to be the one who showed her father what his son had done. After she left, I went back to my study and opened the drawer with the old cards in it, held Marcus's Valentine for a minute, lopsided red heart, backward letters, first grade. I put it back and closed the drawer. I wasn't ready to throw it away. I also wasn't ready to call him. Both of those things were true at the same time. And I'd learned to let true things stand alongside each other without forcing them to resolve into something cleaner. The apothecary cabinet has 48 drawers. Some of them I haven't opened in years. Some of them I open every day. Some things I carry because they're still useful. Some I carry because I'm not ready to set them down yet. Some because letting go of something painful doesn't mean the thing didn't matter. I am 68 years old. I practiced medicine for 41 years, and I have seen enough of the human body to understand that healing is not a straight line. There is inflammation before there is recovery. There is scar tissue. Things grow back differently than they were. Sometimes the repaired version is stronger than the original. Sometimes it's just different, and you learn to work with the difference. I make my breakfast every morning. I read the news. I take a walk around the neighborhood that Eleanor and I mapped together over 20 years of living here, past the park, down to the coffee shop on Walnut where they know my order, back through the side streets where the old houses are, back to my house, which is still mine. I have a good security system now. I have a financial advisor who meets with me directly once a month and copies Claire on all correspondence. I have an attorney who has my documents in order and knows what they say and made sure I knew too. I have a daughter 1,200 miles away who called me at 2:47 inches the morning because she'd found a bleed and traced it back to the wound, and who got on a plane the next day, and who puts lavender on my kitchen windowsill when she visits. And I have 48 drawers, some of which I'm still figuring out what to do with. Time is patient, so am I. If this story resonated with you, please Please take a moment to like this video and subscribe to Pure Revenge Stories. Share your thoughts in the comments below, we read every one. And to hear the next story, click the box on the left. Thank you for listening.